Hi friends, continuing to the chapter How to Win Friends and Influence People. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walk a lonely way. Do you think Mr. Anderson's received any response? 11 of the 12 banks invited her to be interviewed, and she has a choice of which bank offers to accept. Why? Mrs. Anderson did not state what she wanted, but wrote in the letter how she could help them and focused on their wants, not her own. Thousands of salespeople are pounding the pavement today, tired, discouraged, and unpaid. Why? Because they are always thinking only of what they want. They don't realize that neither only of what they want, nor I want to buy anything. If we did, we would go out and buy it. But both of us are internally interested in solving our problems. And if a salespeople can show us how their services or merchandise will help us to solve our problems, they won't need to sell us. We will buy. And customers likes to feel that they are buying, not being sold. Yet many salespeople spend a lifetime in selling without seeing things from the customer's angle. For example, for many years I have lived in a Forest Hill, a little community of the private home in the center of the greater New York. One day, as I was rushing to the station, I challenged to meet a real estate operator who had bought and sold property in that area for many years. He knew Forest Hill well, so I hurriedly asked him whether or not my stucco house was built with metal lath or hollow tile. He said he didn't know and told what I already knew, that I could find out by calling the Forest Hill Garden Associations. The following morning, I received a letter from him. Did he give me the information I wanted? He could have gotten it in the 60 seconds by a telephone call, but he didn't. He told me again that I could get it by the telephoning and then asked me to let him handle my insurance. He was not interested in helping me. He was interested only in helping himself. J. Howard Lewis of Brigham's, Alabama, tells how two salespeople from the same company handle the same type of a situation. He reported, "Several years ago, I was on the management team of a small company. Headquarters near us was the district office of a large insurance company. The agents were assigned territories, and our company was assigned to two agents, whom I shall refer to as Carl and John. One morning, Carl dropped by our office and casually mentioned that his company has just introduced a new life insurance policy for executives, and though we might be interested later on, and he would get back to us when he had more information on it. The same day, John saw on the sidewalk while returning from a coffee break, and he shouted, 'Hey Luke, hold up, I have some great news for you, you fellow.' He hurried over and very excitedly told us about an executive life insurance policy his company has introduced the very day. It was a sample policy that Carl and had casually mentioned. He wanted us to have one of the first issued. He gave us a few important points and facts about the coverage and ending saying, "The policy is so new, I am going to have someone from the Home Office come out tomorrow and explain it. Now, in the meantime, let's get the applications signed on the way so he can have more information to work with." His enthusiasm aroused in us an eager want for this policy, even though we still did not have details. When they were made available to us, they confirmed John's initial understanding of the policy, and he not only sold each of us a policy, but later doubled our coverage. Carl could have had those sales, but he made no efforts to arouse in us any desires for their policies. The world is full of people who are grabbing and self-seeking. So, the rare individuals who unselfishly try to serve others had an enormous advantages. He had little competitions. Owen D. Youngs, a noted lawyer and one of the American great business leaders, once said, "People who can put themselves in the place of the other people, who can understand the working of their minds, need never worry about what the future has in the store for them." If out of reading this book you get just one thing, an increased tendency to think always in terms of other people's points of view and see things from their angle. If you get that one thing out of his book, it may easily prove to be one of the building blocks of your career. Looking at the other person's point of view and arousing in him an eager want for something is not to be constructed as manipulating that person so that he will do something that is the only for your benefit and his determinant. Each party should gain from the negotiation. In the letter to Mr. Verlmine, both the senders and the receivers of the correspondence gained by implemented what was suggested. Both the bank and Mrs. Anderson, owned by her letter in that bank, obtained a valuable employee, and Mrs. Anderson a suitable job. And in the example of John's sales of insurance to Mr. Lucas, both gained through these transactions. Another example in which everybody gains through this principle of arousing an eager wants come from Michael E. Wilton of Warwick, Rhodes Island, who is a terrorist salesman for the Shell Oil Company. Mike wanted to become the number one salesperson in his district, but one service station was holding him back. It was run by an older man who could not be motivated to clean up his station. It was in such a poor shape that sales were declining significantly. This manager would not listen to any of Mike's speeches to upgrade the station. After many exaggerations and heart-to-heart talks, all of which had no impact, Mike decided to invite the manager who visited the newest cell station in his territory. The manager was so impressed by the facilities at the new station that when Mike visited him the next time, his station was cleaned up and had recorded a sales increase. This enabled Mike to reach the number one spot in his district. All his talkings and the discussions hadn't helped, but by arousing an eager want in the manager, by showing him the modern stations, he had accomplished his goal, and both the manager and Mike benefited. Most people go through colleges and learn to read a Vigil and the masters the mysterious of calculus without ever discovering how their own mind functions. For instance, I once gave a course of effective speaking for the young colleges graduate who were entering the employee of the career corporations. The large air conditioner manufacturer, one of the participants wanted to pursue the others to play basketball in their free time. And this is about what he said. I want you to come out and play football. I like to play a basketball, but the few times I have been the gymnasium, there haven't been enough people to get up a game. 2 or 3 of us got to throwing the ball around the other night, and I got a black eye. I wish all of you would come down tonight. I want to play a basketball. Did he talk about anything you want? You don't want to go to gymnasium that no one else go to, do you? You don't care about what he wants. You don't want to get a black eyes. Could have shown you how to get the things you want by using the gymnasiums. Surely, more peep cannot age to the appetite, clever brain, fun, games, basketballs. To repeat, Professor Overstreet's wise advice first arose in the other person an eager want. He who cannot do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. One of the students in the author's training courses was worried about his little boy. The child was underweight and refused to eat properly. His parents used the usual method. They scolded and nagged. Mother wanted you to eat this and that. Father wants you to grow up to be a big man. Did the boy pay any attention to these pleases? Just about as much as you pay to one flake of sand on a sandy beach. No one with a trace of horror sense would accept a child 3 years old to react to the overpoint of a father 30 years old. Yet that was preciously what that father has expected. It was abused. He finally saw that. So he said to himself, what does that boy want? How can I tie up what I want to what he wants? It was easy for the father when he started thinking about it. His boy had a tricycle that he loved to ride up and down the sidewalks in front of his house in the Brooklyn. A few doors down the street lived a bully, a bigger boy who would pull the little boy off his tricycle and ride in himself. Naturally, the little boy would run screaming to his mother, and she would have to come out and take the bully off the tricycle and put her little boy on cane. This happened almost every day. What did the boy want? I didn't take a Sherlock Holmes to answer that one. His pride, his anger, his desire for a feeling of importance, all the strongest emotional in his makeup, goaded him to get revenge, to smash the bully in the nose. And when his father explains that the boy would be able to wallow up the daylight out of the bigger kid someday if he would not eat the things his mother wanted him to eat, longer any problem of diabetes. The boy would have eaten spinach, salt mackerel, and anything in order to be big enough to whip the bully who had humiliated him so often. After solving that problem, the parents tackled another. the little boy and the unholy habit of wetting his bed. He slept with his grandmother. In the morning, his grandmother would wake up and feel the sheet, saying that, "Look, Johnny, what you did last night." He would say, "No, I didn't, I don't do it." "You did it." Scolding, spanking, smacking him, reiterating him that the parent didn't want him to do it. None of these things kept the bed dry. So the parents asked, "How can we make this boy want to stop wetting his bed?" What were his wants? First, he wanted to wear a pajamas like daddy instead of wearing a nightgown like grandmother. Grandmother was getting fed up with this natural inequalities, so she gladly offered to buy him a pair of pajamas if he would reform. Second, he wanted a bed of his own. Grandma didn't object. His mother took him to a departmental store in Brookline, winked at the salesgirl and said, "Here is a little gentleman who would like to do some shopping." The salesgirl made him feel important by saying, "Young man, what can I show you?" He stood a couple of inches taller and said, "I want to buy a bed for myself." When he was shown the one his mother wanted him to buy, she winked at the salesgirl and the boy was persuaded to buy it. The bed was delivered the next day, and that night when father came home, the little boy ran to the door shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, come upstairs and see my bed that I bought." The father, looking at the bed, obeyed Charles Schwab's injunction. He was hearty in his approaches and lavish in his praise. "You are not going to wet the bed, are you?" the father said. "Oh, no, no, I am not going to wet this bed." The boy kept his promises, for his pride was involved. That was his bed. He alone bought this, and he was wearing pajamas now like a little man. He wanted to act like a man, and he did. Another father, Katie Duxman, a telephone engineering, a student of his course, couldn't give his 3-year-old daughter to eat breakfast food. The unusual scoldings, pleadings, cautioning methods had all ended in futility. So the parents asked themselves, "How can we make her want to do it?" The little girl loved to imitate her mother, to feel big and grown up. One morning they put her on a chair and let her make the breakfast food. At just the psychological moment, I settled and she said, "Oh, look, Daddy, I am making the cereal this morning." She ate 2 helpings of the cereal without any coaxing because she was interested in it. She had achieved a feeling of importance. She had found in making the cruel advent of self-expression. William Winter once referred this, stating that self-expression is a dominant necessary of human nature. Why can't we adopt this same psychology to the business dealings? When we have a brilliant idea, instead of making others overthink, it is yours. Why not tell them to cook and stir the idea themselves? They will be regards it and as their own. They will like it and maybe eat a couple of helping of it. Remember, first arouse in the old person an eager want. He would can do this, has the whole world with him. He cannot walk a lonely way. Do this and you will be welcome anywhere. You may meet him tomorrow coming down all the street. When you get within 10 feet of him, he will begin to wag his tail. If you stop and pat him, he will almost jump out of his skin to show you how much he likes you. And the behind this shows of affection on his part, there was no ulterior motivations. He doesn't want to sell you a real estate and he doesn't want to marry you. Did you ever stop to think that a dog is the only animal that doesn't have to work for a living? A hen has to lay eggs, a cow has to give milk, a canary has to sing. But a dog makes his living by giving you nothing by love. When I was 5 years old, my father bought a little yellow-haired puppy for 50 cents. He was light and joy of my childhood. Every afternoon about 4:30, he would sit in the front yard with his beautiful eye staring steadfastly at the path. As soon as he heard my voice or saw me swinging my dinner pail through the back truck, he was off like a shot, racing breathlessly up the hill to greet me with leaps of joy and barks of cheer. Tippy was my constant companion for 5 years. Then one tragic night, I shall never forget it, he was killed with 10 feet off my head, killed by lightning. Tippy's death was the tragedy of my boyhood. You never read a book of psychology, Tippy. You didn't mean to. You knew by some divine instinct that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people's interested in you. Let me repeat that. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. Yet, I know and you know people who blunder through life trying to wigwag other people into becoming interested in them. Of course, it doesn't work. People are not interested in you. They are interested in me. They are interested in themselves. Morning, noon, and after dinner. The New York Telephone Company was made a detailed study of telephone conversation to find out which word is the most frequently used. You have guessed it? It is person pronoun, I. It was used 3,900 times in 500 telephone conversation. I. When you see a group photograph that you are in, whose pictures do you look for the first? If we merely try to impress people and get people interested in us, we will never have many true, sincere friends, real friends, and are not made the way. Napoleon tried it, and in his last meeting with Josephine, he said, Josephine, I have been as fortunate as any man ever was on this earth, and yet, and this hour, you are the only person in the world on whom I can rely. And historians doubt whether he can rely even on her. Alfred Adler, the famous Viennese psychologist, wrote a book entitled What Life Should Mean to You. In that book, he says, it is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men who has the greatest difficulties in his life and provide the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failure spring. You may read scores of erudite tomes on psychology without crossing a statement more significant for you and for me. Adler's statement is so rich with meaning that I am going to repeat it in italics. It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men, who has the greatest difficulties in life and provides a great injuries to the others. It is from among such individuals that all human failure spring. In one took a course in a short story writing at New York universities, and during the course the editor of a leading magazine talked to the class. He said he could pick up any one of the dozen of the stories that drifted across his desk every day, and after reading a few paragraphs he would feel whether or not the author liked people. If the author doesn't like people, he said, people won't like his or her stories. This hard-boiled editor stopped twice in the course of his talk on fiction writing and apologized for passing a sermon. I am telling you, he said, the same thing your preacher would tell you. But remember, you have to be interested in the people if you want to be a successful writer of stories. Is it true of writing fictions? You can be sure it is true of dealing with people face to face. I spent an evening in the dressing room of Homeward Thurston the last time he appeared on Broadway. Thurston was the acknowledged dean of magician. 44 years he had traveled all over the world, time and again, creating an illusion, mystifying an audiences, and making people gasp with astonishment. More than 60 million people he paid attention to his show, and he had made almost $3 million in profit. I asked Mr. Thurston to tell me the secret of his success. His schooling certainly had nothing to do with it, for he ran away from the home as a small boy, became a hobo, rode in a box craft, slept in hack sticks, begged his food from door to door, and learned to read by looking out of boxcars at the signs along the railways. Did he have a superior knowledge of magic? No. He told me hundreds of the books he had been written about the leader main, and scores of the people knew as much as it as he did. But he had two things that the others didn't have. First, he had the ability to put his personality across the footlights. He was a master showman. He knew human nature. Everything he did, every gestures, every intonations on his voice, every lifting of an eyebrow has been carefully rehearsed in advance, and his actions were timed to split sounds. But in addition to that, Thurston has genuine interest in people. He told me that many magicians would look at the audience and say to themselves, well, there is a bunch of suckers out there, a bunch of hicks. I will fool them all right. But Thurston's method was totally different. He told to me that every time he went onto the stage, he said to himself, I am grateful because these people comes to see me. They make it possible for me to make my living in a very agreeable way. I am going to give them the very best I possibly can. He declared that he never stepped in front of the footlighting without first saying to himself over and over, I love my audience, I love my audience. Ridiculous, absurd. You are privileged to think anything you like. I am merely passing it on to you without comment as a recipe used by one of the most famous magicians of all time. George Duke of North Warren, Pennsylvania, was forced to retire from his service station business after 30 years when a new highway was construction over the site of his station. It wasn't long before the idle day of the retirement began to bore him. So he started filling his time trying to play music on his old fiddle. Soon he was traveling the area to listen to the music and talk with many of the accomplished fiddlers. In this humble and friendly way, he has become generally interested in learning the background and interest of every musician he met. Although he was not a great fiddler himself, he made many friends in his purest. He attended competitions and soon became known to country music fans in the eastern part of United States as Uncle George, the fiddle Caspers from Newsia country. When we hear Uncle John, he had 72 and enjoying every minute of his life. By having a sustained interest in other people, he created a new life for himself at a time when most people consider their productive years over. That too was one of the secrets of Theodore Roosevelt's astonishing popularity. Even his servants loved him. His valet, James E. Amos, wrote a book about his entitled Theodore Roosevelt's Hero to his Valet. In that book, Amos relates his illuminating incident. My wife one time asked the president about a bob white. She had never seen one and he described to her fully. Some time later, the telephone at our cottage rang. My wife answered it and it was Mr. Roosevelt himself. He had called her. He said to tell her that there was a bob white outside her window and that if she could look out, she might see it. Little things like that were so characteristic of him. Whenever he went by our cottage, even though we were out of sight, we would hear him call out, "Oh, Annie, oh, James." It was just a friendly greeting as he went by. How could employee keep from liking a man like that? How could anyone keep from liking him? Roosevelt called at the White House one day when the President and Mr. Taft were away. His honest liking for human people was shown by the fact that he was greeted all the old White House servants by the name, even the scullery maids. When he saw Alice, the kitchen maid, writes Archie's butt, he asked her if she still made a cornbread. Alice told him that she sometimes made it for the servants, but no one ate in the upstairs. They show bad taste. Roosevelt boomed, and I will tell the president so when I see him. Alice brought a piece to him on a plate, and he went over to the office, eating it as he wont and greeting the gardener and the laborer as he passed. He addressed each person just as he had addressed them in the past. Hike Hoover, who have been heard usher at the White House for 40 years, said with tears in his eyes, "It is the only happy day we had in nearly 2 years, and not one of us would exchange it for $100 bill." The same concern for the seemingly unimportant people helped sales representative Edward M. Skies, Jr. of Chatmont, New Jersey, return an account. Many years ago, he reported, "I called on a customer for Johnson & Johnson's in Massachusetts area. One account was a drugstore in Hingham. Whenever I went to the store, I would always talk to the soda clerk and the sales clerk for few minutes before talking to the owner to obtain his order. One day, I went up to the owner of the store and he told me to leave as he was not interested in buying Johnson & Johnson products anymore because he felt that they were concentrating the activities on food and discount stores to the detriment of the small drugstore. I left with my tail between my legs and decided to go to back and try at least to explain our position to the owner of the store. When I returned, I walked in and as usually said hello to the soda clerk and the sales clerk. When I walked up to the owner, he smiled at me and welcomed me back. He then gave me a double the usual order. I looked at him with a surprise and asked him what had happened since my last visit only a few hours earlier. He pointed to that young man at the soda fountain and said after that I had left. The boy had come over and said that I was the only few salespeople that called on the store that even bothered to say hello to him and to the others in the store. He told the owner that if any salesperson deserved his business, it was I. The owner agreed and remained a loyal customer. I will never forget that to be genuinely interested in others people is the most important quality for a salesperson to possess, for any permission for that matter. I have discovered for personal experience that one can win the attention and time and cooperation of even the most might sought after people by becoming genuinely interested in them. Let me illustrate. Years ago, I conducted a course in fiction writing the Brookline Industries Institute of Arts and Science. And we wanted such distinguished and busy authors as Kathleen Norris, Fannie Hurst, Idla Tarbell, Albert Payson, Tronji, and Rupert Honks to come to Brookline and give us the benefit of their experience. So we wrote them saying we admired their work and were deeply interested in getting their advice and learning the secret of this success. Each of these letters was signed by about 150 students. We said we realized that these authors were busy, too busy to prepare a lecture. So we enclosed a list of a question for them to answer about themselves and their methods of work. They liked that. He wouldn't like that. So they filled their homes and travels to Brookline to give us a helping hand. By using the same method, I pursued Leslie M. Shaw, the Secretary of the Treasury in the Theodore Roosevelt's cabinet, George W. Wickershaw, editor of Attorney General in Taft's cabinet, William Jennings Bryan, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and many other prominent men to come to talk to the students of my course in public speakings. All of us we work in a factory, clerks in an office, or even a king's upon his throne. All of us like people who admire us. Take the German Kaiser, for example. At the close of the World War I, he was probably the most savoury and universally despised man on this earth. Even his own nature turned against him when he fled into Holland to save his neck. The harsh against him was so intense that millions of the people would have loved to tear his claim from limb and or burn him at the stake. In the midst of all this forest fire of fury, one little boy wrote the Kaisers a simple, sincere letter glowing with kindness and administration. This little boy said that no matter what the others thought, he would always love Wintel and his emperor. The Kaiser was deeply touched by his letter and came, so did his mother. And Kaiser mentioned her that the little boy didn't need to read a book on how to win friends and influence people. He knows how intensively. If we want to make friends, let's put ourselves out to do things for other people. Things that require time, energy, unselfishness, and thoughtfulness. When the Duke of the Windsters and a Principal of Wales, he was scheduled to tour South America, and before she started out on the tour, he spent months studying Spanish so that he could make public talks in the language of the country, and the South American loved it for it. For years, I made it an appointment to find out the birthdays of my friends. How? Although I haven't the foggiest bit of the faith in astrology, I begin by saying the other party whether he believes the days of one's birth has anything to do with characters and dispositions. I then asked him or tell to her me that month and days of birth. If she or he said November 24th, for example, I kept repeating to myself, November 24th, November 24th. A minute my friend back was turned, I wrote down the name and the birthday and later would transfer into a birthday book. At the beginning of each year, I had these birthday dates schedules in my calendar pad so that they came to the attention automatically. When the National Day arrived, there was my letter or telegram. What a hit it made! I was frequently the only person on the earth who remembered. If we want to make friends, let's greet people with animation and enthusiasm. When somebody calls you on the telephone using the same psychology, say hello in tones with buzz speakers how pleased you are in the have the person call. Many companies train their telephone operators to greet all caller in a tone of a voice that company is concerned about them. Let's remember that when we answer the telephone tomorrow, showing a genuine interest in others and not only wins friends for you, but many develops in these customers a loyalty to our company. In an issue of the publications of the Nation Bank of North America of North Korea, the following letters from the Madeleine Rosette, a disclosure was published. I would like to know how much I appreciate your staff. Everyone is so courageous, polite, and helpful. What a pleasure it is. After waiting on a long time to have the teller greet you personally. Last year, my mother was hospitalized for 5 months. Frequently, I went to Mary to a telephone. She was concerned about my mother and inquired about her progress. Is there any doubt that Mrs. Roswell will continue to use this bank? Charles R. Walter, one of the large banks in New York City, she assigned the preparation of the confident report on certain corporations. He knew of only one person who possessed the fact he needed so urgently as Mr. Walter was ushered into the president's office. A young woman stuck her head through a door and told the president that she didn't have any stamps for him that day. I am collecting stamps for my 12-year-old son, the president explained to Mr. Walter. Mr. Walter started his mission and began asking questions. The president was Wage General Nibras. He didn't want to talk, and apparently nothing could persuade him to talk. The interview was brief and barren. Frankly, I didn't know what to do, Mr. Walter said as he related the story to this class. Then I remembered what his secretary had said to him. Stamps, 12-year-old son, and I also recall that the foreign department of a bank collected stamps. Stamps taken from letter pouring in front of every continent washed by the 7 seas. We spent half an hour talking about the stamp and looking at the picture of his boy, and he then devoted more than an hour of his time to giving me every bit of the information I wanted. Without my even suggestions that he do it, he told me all he knew and then called in his subordinates and questioned them. He telephoned some of his associates. He loaded me down with facts, figures, reports, and the correspondence. In the parlance of a newspaper reporters, I have a scoop. Here is another illustrations. C.M. Naffel, junior of a Philadelphia, has tried for years to sell a fuel to a large chain store organization, but the chain store company continued to purchase its fuel from an out-of-town dealers and haul it right past the door of a cafe office. Mr. Naffel made a speech one night before one of my classes, pouring out his hot wrath upon chain stores, branding them as a curse to the nation. And still he wondered why he couldn't sell them. I suggested that he will try a tactic. To put it briefly, this is what happened. We staged a debate between the members of the course on whether the spread of the chain store is doing the country more harm than good. Naffel, at my suggestion, took the negative side. He agreed to defend the chain stores and then went straight to an executive of the chain store organization that he despised and said, I am not here to try to sell the fuel. I have come to ask you to do me a favor. He then told about his debate and said, I have come to you for the help because I can't think of anyone else who would be more capable of giving me the facts I want. I am anxious to win this debate, and I will deeply appreciate whatever helps you can give me. Here is the rest of the story in Mr. Naffle's own words. I had asked him the name for a preciously 1 minute of his time. It was with that understanding that he constructed to see me. After I had stayed my cause, he mentioned me to a chair and talked to me for exactly 1 hour and 47 minutes. He called me in the other executive who had written a book on chain stores. He wrote to the Nation Chain Stores Associations and secured for me a copy of a debate on the subject. He feels that the chain store is rendering a real service to the humanity. He is proud of what he is doing for hundreds of communities. His eyes fairly glowed as he talked, and I must confess that he opened my eyes to things I had never ever dreamed of. He changed my whole mental attitudes. As I was leaving, he walked with me to the door, put his arms around my shoulders, wished me well in my debate, and asked me to stop in and see him again and let him know how I made out. The last word he said to me were, Please see me again later in the spring. I should like to place an order with you for a fuel. To me, that was almost a miracle. Here he was offering to buy a fuel without even suggesting it. I had made more headway in 2 hours by becoming genuinely interested in him and his problems that I could have made in 10 years trying to get him interested in me and my products. You didn't discover a truth, Mr. Naffle, for a long time ago. 100 years before Christ was born, a famous old Roman poet, Philippus Cyrus, remarks as, We are interested in others when they are interested in us. A show of interest, as with every other principles of human relations, must be sincere. It must pay off not only for the person showing the interest but for the person receiving the attention. It is a two-way street, both parties benefit. Martin Ginsburg, who took our courses in Long Island, New York, reported how the special interest a nurse took in him profoundly affected his life. It was Thanksgiving Day and I was 10 years old. I was in a welfare ward of a city hospital and was scheduled to undergo major orthopedic surgery the next day. I knew that I could only look forward to months of confinement and pain. My father was dead. My mother and I lived alone in a small apartment and we are on welfare. My mother was unable to visit me that day. As the days went on, I became overwhelmed with the feelings of loneliness, despair, and fear. I knew my mother was home alone, worrying about me, not having anyone to be with, and not having anyone to eat with, and not even having enough money to afford a Thanksgiving Day dinner. The tears welled up in my eyes, and I was tucked my head under the pillow and pulled the covers over it. I cried silently, but oh, so bitterly, so much that my body racked that pain. A young student nurse heard my sobbings and came over to me. She took the cover off my face and started wiping my tears. She told me how lonely she was, having to work that day and not being able to be with her family. She asked me whether I would have dinner with her. She bought 2 trays of food: sliced turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and ice cream for desserts. She talked to me and tried to calm my fear, even though she was scheduled to off duty at 4 p.m. She stayed on her own time until almost 11 p.m. She played games with me, walked to me, and stayed with me until I finally fell asleep. Many Thanksgiving have come and gone since I was 10, but one never passes without me remembering the particular one and my feelings of frustration, fear, loneliness, and the warmth and the tenderness of the stranger that somehow made it all bearable. If you want others to like you, if you want to develop real friendship, if you want to help others at the same time as you help yourself, keep this principle in your mind. A simple way to make a good first impression. At a dinner party in New York, one of the guests, a woman who have inherited money, was eager to make a pleasing impression on everyone. She had squandered a most fortune on sables, diamonds, and pearls, but she hadn't done anything whatever about her face. Its radical soreness and selfishness. She didn't realize what everyone knows, namely that the expressions one wears on one's face is far more important than the clothes one wears on one's back. Charles Schwab told me his smile had been worth $1,000,000, and he was probably understanding the truth. For Schwab's personality, his charm, his disability to make people like him, we almostly wholly responsible for his extraordinary success. And one of the most delightful factors in his personality was his captivating smile. Action speaks louder than the words, and a smile says, "I love you. You make me happy. I am glad to see you." That is why dogs make such a hit. They are so glad to see you as that they almost jump out of their skins. So naturally, we are glad to see them. A baby smile has the same effect. Have you ever been in a doctor's waiting room and looked around at a glance, faces waiting impatiently to be seen? Dr. Stephen K. Sporrell, a veterinarian in Rawtown, Missouri, told of a physical spring day when his waiting room was full of clients waiting to have their pets isolated. No one was talking to anyone else, and all were probably thinking of a dozen other things they would rather be doing than wasting time sitting in that office. He told one of our classes there were 6 or 7 clients waiting when a young woman came in with a 9-month-old baby and a kitten. As luck would have it, she sat down next to a gentleman who would more than a little distressed about the long wait for service. The next thing he knew, the baby just looked up at him with a great big smile that is so characteristic of babies. What did the gentleman do? Just what you and I would do. Of course, he smiled back at the baby. Soon, he struck up a conversation with the woman about her baby and his grandchildren's. And soon the entire reception room joined in, and the boardroom and the tension were converted into a pleasant and enjoyable experience. An insincere grin, no, that doesn't fool anybody. We know it is a mechanical and we resent it. I'm talking about a real smile, a heartwarming smile, a smile that comes from within. The kind of a smile that will bring a good price in the marketplace. Professor James V. McConnell, a psychologist at the University of Michigan, expressed his feeling about a smile. People who smile, he said, tends to manage, teach and sell more effectively and to raise a happier children. There's for more information in a smile than a frown. That's why encouragement is a much more effective teaching device than punishments. The employment manager of a large New York department store told me that she would rather hire a sales clerk who hadn't finished grade schools if he or she had a pleasant smile than to hire a doctor of a psychology with a somber face. The effect of a smile is powerful even when it is unseen. The telephone companies throughout the United States have a program called Phone Power, which is offered to the employees who use the telephone for selling their services or products. In this program, they suggested that you smile when talking on the phone. Your smile comes through in your voice. Thank you.